And speaking of moms, I just wanted to take a moment and just honor my mom. Unfortunately, my mother passed not too long ago, and it's the first time in 56 years that I'm not going to have her with me on this physical planet. And I just want to make this talk, if you will, a little tribute to my mom. This is a picture of her at our wedding 4 years ago, and us getting ready to walk down the aisle. And I will never forget that moment, that time, the time we got to spend with her that day, and obviously all the time since then. But I miss my mom. I really do. And for all of those that have lost your mom, I just also want to send a little prayer out to you as well, because I know that there's still that connection. There's still, I believe, the ability for people to communicate with us. And although I still feel my mom's spirit very strongly as I move forward, without her on the physical plane, there's still the grieving process. And so I just thought I wanted to do my little thing to be able to send a little shout out and make this a little tribute to my mom. So, thanks, Mom. So we're continuing our series this week in a series that's called Unity, Why Now is the name of it. And the name of this talk specifically is Who and What You Are. If you remember last week, we talked about this idea is, well, what is it that makes Unity so special? And we talked about this idea of metaphysics. And metaphysics means beyond the physical. So at Unity, we're always looking at things on a deeper level. And so as I begin the talk, I wanted to share a very popular story that's called The Chained Elephant. Some of you may know the story. One day, a gigantic circus arrived at their town. This little boy had never seen a circus before. Everybody at school was talking about it. They all said they were going to go to the circus after school. They wanted to see how they put up the tent and how they set everything up from the big circus. The little boy asked his parents if they could take him to the circus. He was dying to watch the jugglers, the clowns, and the animal tamers. He had noticed that they carried huge, mysterious animals with them: a tiger, a lion, an elephant, and several zebras. The child's parents agreed to take him to the circus. The boy was very excited. He couldn't sleep on Saturday night knowing that the next day he would see the show that interested him so much. As soon as the sun rose, he got out of bed. Time passed slowly until it was finally time to go. The parents brought their son popcorn and cotton candy. He enjoyed his snacks, but he was more excited to see the show. To him, it was so fantastic that it seemed as it was from another world. He loved the trapeze artists and the animal shows. The lion was so tame and docile that he greeted the audience. The zebras were agile. They ran in perfect circles without losing their rhythm. And the elephant was so amazing that it stood on 2 legs and joked with the clowns. The boy was so fascinated that at the end of the show, he decided to go back to see the artists and their wonderful animals. He walked with his parents to the back of the circus, and he saw the animals were in a cage. The elephant, however, was outdoors. The boy approached the elephant, and he saw that something had changed one of its legs to a stake in the dirt. The animal wasn't moving at all. Why are they interested so much? The boy couldn't get the chained elephant out of his head. He didn't like to see the animals in the cages. However, what had affected him the most was the elephant. He was free but tied down at the same time. Although the chain was thick, the boy could tell that the elephant could remove the stake from the ground if it wanted to. After all, it was a gigantic animal. The boy asked his parents why the circus people had chained the elephant. They replied, so he doesn't run away. So he doesn't run away? He could run away if he wanted to, the boy said. For the boy, the chain and stake weren't obstacles. For the elephant, the boy then asked his parents, why doesn't he run away then? His parents shrugged their shoulders and couldn't give him an answer. The boy continued the questions and overall restlessness. The next day, he asked his science teacher the same question, and she gave a blunt response. He doesn't run away because he's trained. The science teacher then explained how the trainers trained the animals. The child in the story of the chained elephant understood that although the animal was quite big now, it was once very small. When it was small, someone tied one of its legs to a chain and to a small stake. The boy imagined how much the baby elephant probably fought to release the chain without getting hurt or get in trouble. The boy understood that the elephant didn't realize how big it was when it grew up. The elephant only remembered being a small elephant fighting against a chain and a stake that wouldn't budge. That is why, although it could not free itself, it no longer tried. To the elephant, the memory of that impossibility in the past was stronger than the real possibility of the present. The story of the chained elephant resembles many people's stories. People who remain tied to the bad past experiences. They don't try again because they're holding on to their negative experiences. This holds them back from the real possibilities of the present that could completely transform their lives. You see, it wasn't that the elephant couldn't simply walk away. He was big enough, he was strong enough to rip that stake out of the ground. All he had to do was move forward. That was it. But he didn't do it. He didn't do it. And why didn't he do that? Because it all comes down to his perception of who and what he was. And that perception impacts everything. Your perception of who and what you are impacts every single area of your life. Every single area. I want to take a moment and just talk about that because I think it's really powerful in terms of when we talk about things like human consciousness, when we talk about potential, when we talk about possibility, it impacts literally everything. So what I want to do is spend a few minutes just talking about specifically psychology or behavioral psychology. You see, behavioral psychology is a science. It started way back in the early 1900s by a couple of psychologists named John Watson, and Edward Thorndike. And what these two people started to realizing that behavioral psychology was really simple. How do human beings behave? Why do they behave? And they came up with a pretty easy set of thoughts or understandings of what makes us work. And that is our thoughts are connected to our feelings. Our feelings will then influence or impact our behaviors. So again, behavioral psychology in the simplest format has to do with how we behave as a human being, and that is our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors and actions. And so that whole entire body of work, and there was many famous people that used behavioral psychology that used over the years, and they used that, and then what happened is as psychology started to advance and our understanding started to advance, things started to change a little bit. And specifically, what changed was in 2005. Now, there was many changes before that, and I'm not giving you an entire history of it, but to me, the thing that really changed things, the game changer was, in Bruce Lipton's book in 2005, in The Biology of a Belief, Lipton said that yes, this may be true. In other words, our thoughts and feelings and behaviors do impact us. But what he said was that the thing that overrules all of that are our self-perceptions and our beliefs. That underlying everything, that whole entire circle, that whole entire process, that you better take into consideration what your self-perceptions and your beliefs are. So what he did is he just imposed it into the circle. And so now what we're saying is add the self-perceptions and beliefs into it and understand it's that self-perception that really is the thing that controls your thoughts and then controls your feelings, emotions, and then controls your behaviors. That's kind of how this whole thing works, right? And so when you think about that, then the next logical question is, okay, well, if my self-perceptions is the thing that's controlling everything, then what are my self-perceptions? What are they? Now, just understand something. From a conscious standpoint, as an adult, I can ask you that question, like, what do you think about life? What's your perception about life? What's your perception about who and what you are? And then I could get really crazy and ask you a question, what do you think about God? That might even be a mind-blowing question. What do I think about that? But all of these things are called your self-perceptions, and we have a lot of different self-perceptions. But as you really start to study that, and as psychology started studying it, and all these different bodies of work started studying it, the next question that came up was, okay, well, not only what are my self-perceptions, but where did my self-perceptions come from? Now look, I'm not going to sit here and spend an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours on something that could take that long or then some. There's entire courses written on that, college courses, college degrees on this. But here's the basis of it. What I'm going to share with you is this, is that by far the majority of our self-perceptions are held within our unconscious, our subconscious minds. They're in our subconscious memory. And those self-perceptions were instilled in us from the ages when we were born till roughly the age of about 7, is what they estimate. Now, here's the real kicker about those self-perceptions, is they didn't come from us. Just understand, when you're young, the way that I explain it is like you're a great big sponge, and you just keep taking in all this information. You just keep taking it all in. And so what happens is we start taking in this information because we don't have any ability, any way of blocking it out. So if that's the case, if you think about it, then where did our self-perceptions really come from? Our parents? Maybe our relatives? Maybe some friends? Maybe some teachers? Maybe some preachers? Or maybe society? As you look at that list, do you notice one thing that is really missing? That thing that's missing is you. Your original self-perceptions you got did not come from you. They came from every single thing outside of ourselves, and that is hugely, hugely, hugely important. Some other notes about our self-perceptions, and that is most of them are based off of historical data that may or may not be accurate. That's right. What you think about yourself may not be accurate. That's true. Most of the time, we don't even remember when we got them. Again, we're 0, we're born, and then from 7 years old, most of the stuff is buried so far into our subconscious, it's crazy. Most of the time, they didn't come from us. Again, they came from somebody else. Your perceptions impact the way that you act and the way that you show up in life. Your perceptions impact the way others act and show up in your life because of the way that you treat them and the way that you let them treat you. How you perceive anything informs whatever you look at, think about, or talk about, and therefore you act accordingly. Right? So the question is, what does your self-perception of who and what you are impact? It impacts everything. Last week, I was sharing the story with you about the Fillmores, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And if you remember right, what I said happened with Myrtle was that she was sickly. And at the time, she had tuberculosis. Back then, tuberculosis was basically a death warrant. It was a death pledge. In other words, you got tuberculosis, they didn't have a way of they didn't have the vaccine for it. And you died. That's what happened when you got tuberculosis. And they were running around crazy trying to figure out what they could do about that. And if you remember right, as the story goes, what happens is they go and they see the speaker called E.B. Weeks, and E.B. Weeks says what? You're a child of God, and therefore you don't inherit sickness. You don't inherit sickness. Now, I just want you to think about that. And then Myrtle heard that and went absolutely crazy. She just was on fire with it. She'd never heard of that before. She said, wait a minute, I'm a child of God, and because I'm a child of God, therefore I don't inherit sickness. And she took off and ran with that. I talked about that in the talk last week. My understanding of that is what I want you to understand is in that moment, Myrtle had her aha moment. She went from a fundamental understanding of who and what she was to a completely different understanding. Completely different. She had her great awakening. You see, her old perception was more from what I would call traditional Christian perception, which was she was completely separate from God, totally. That she was born in original sin, that she was a sinner, that she needed to be baptized and be saved, that she needed to be forgiven up until that moment. But it was in that moment that her understanding completely transformed. And she went from understanding that this perception change from one of being separate from God or the divine to being a part of it. That's what she understood. The second thing she did is she accepted it, and she started to live her life as if it were true. She switched her understanding because what she thought was, well, now wait a minute. If I'm a child of God, then there's a piece of me that is God or the divine. And if that's the case, that if I start focusing instead on the part of me that's not divine, and I focus on the part of me that is divine, and I start breathing life into that, and I start paying attention to it, that I'll strengthen that part of me that I've forgotten, and then I get to remember who and what I am. And that's what happened with Myrtle. She woke up. She had her great awakening. She did it. Now, she's not the only one that did this. As we know, Jesus did this. Now, again, maybe it was completely different in the way that he did it. It was a lot different than the way Myrtle did it. But he used the exact same process over 2,000 years ago. What was the process? Well, I'm just going to read something from Discover the Power Within from Eric Butterworth, one of my favorite authors, Unity authors. Butterworth says, and then one day it happened. Into the consciousness of this thoughtful lad came an idea so great that he probably didn't catch its full implications at first. It was a concept leading to the full realization of his unity with God. And I'm just going to say that again. It was a concept leading to the full realization of his unity with God. In other words, there was no separation. Jesus realized that there was no separation between him and the divine. Didn't Jesus himself said, I and the Father are one? He did. That I am one with the divine is really what he meant. There is no separation. See, Jesus had within him the seed of the divine. That seed, that what we call that in unity, is basically the Christ. So I hate to break it to you, but Jesus' last name was not Christ. The Christ is that seed. He was the one that recognized that, and he figured out how to embody it. The other thing that he did is he made a great decision. What was the great decision? From the book, Discover the Power from Within. This Christ within you is you at the point of the divine. However, you must become conscious of this and make the decision to act as though you are it. This is as fundamental as turning on a light switch. But it's you that must make the decision and turn on the light switch. And that means to turn on the light switch means to accept the Christ, accept that part of the divine that is within you. You have to accept that. And that's exactly what Myrtle did, and that's exactly what Jesus did as well. The impact that this has on us individually and collectively has been incredible. It's been amazing on both sides, good and bad. We have a tendency to focus on the bad, but there's also other people that have had this realization. Jesus Christ wasn't the only one. There's been a lot of other people that have had this realization. Now, again, granted, they all do it a little bit differently than Jesus did it, but they did it nonetheless, right? And I love this quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who says, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." So again, what are these people doing? They're remembering that part of us that's the divine, the part of us that's the Christ, and they're paying attention to it and they're breathing life into it. I want you to understand that just from the perspective, especially from Unity's perspective, is that the old perception is that God is up there and completely separate from us. And that's kind of the old traditional way of understanding it. But the new perception is that actually that we're part of the divine. I can't tell you how big of an impact and the difference that has made. And what I want to leave you with today as you think about it, as you move forward in your day, is just this understanding that you are divine, that you actually have a part of the seed, this thing inside of you, this Christ seed inside of you, and nobody or no circumstances or nothing that you've done can ever, 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 ever take that away from you, no matter what. It cannot happen. But we've got to do the two things. We've got to make the great awareness, the great awakening. We've got to have our own aha moment where it's like, oh my God, you mean to tell me I can really have this moment? And the answer is, yes, you can. And then what do? Well, then what we do is we make that decision every single day. We get up in the morning and we remind ourselves, or we accept that we are one with the divine. If you do that, I will tell you that your entire life will begin to transform, if you honestly do it. This isn't just a one and done kind of a thing. Just understand that the thing that makes this process so difficult is because of the fact that from a consciousness standpoint, this has been ingrained with us for generation after generation after generation after generation. Why? Because we've been told we are everything but it. Depending on how you were brought up, I will tell you the last thing that I was ever taught that I was divine. And I've got to believe that there's a lot of people out there that are having the same thoughts or the same ideas. We all have a different background. We all come from something that's a little bit different. But my understanding of my own process of when I was growing, when I started to have my awakening moment, it was like a complete and different game changer. And what I'm going to share with you, what I hope you take away from this talk and is this idea that you are really one with the divine. You have your awakening moment, like, can this really be true? This is what Jesus came down to remind us about. I think historically one of the biggest things that we miss, that we blow, is that we don't really live the message that Jesus taught. And what I mean by that is this. If, from a historical perspective, if you look at what Jesus really taught by what he did, what did he do? He focused on the divine within himself. I'm sorry, but other than hearing in the Bible where he went off and did some prayers occasionally to talk to God, I don't ever remember Jesus running around following other masters. I never read that. In the Bible that I read, that story isn't in there. But what I do know is that Jesus was fully aware of the divinity within him and did everything that he possibly could to ignite that or fire that thing up. And then once he did that, then he lived it. So in my opinion, from a historical standpoint, the mistake that we make is that we look at Jesus and we pay attention to his divinity. All the stories, all the teachings, everything we talk about is the divinity in Jesus, the man. And yet, we forget about talking about the divinity within ourselves. And in my opinion, that is what Jesus was really all about. He was here to remind us to observe him, to observe what he was doing. What was he doing? He realized he was one with the divine. He focused on that. He realized that that meant a lot of really cool things, and we'll talk about that next week. But what he realized was that when he focused on it, it became alive. He didn't buy into the baggage. He didn't buy into all the self-perceptions. He didn't become the elephant. He became the embodiment of the divine. Better than anybody. Better than anybody. And I really believe if he had an opportunity to come down here, what he would just say is, look at what I did. I was just the divine. I realized and lived and believed that I was one with God. And I never wavered from that, even in my darkest hour. Even when I was going through the crucifixion, I didn't waver. I knew that I was connected to the divine, and I never forgot that. I really hope that as you walk away today, you walk away from this message, that there's been something that I've said that will remind you of just how amazing you are. You've got a spark of the divine within you. If you will just trust that it's there, no matter what's going on right now, no matter of your past, no matter what difficulties that you've got going on right now, it's not that we say ignore all of that. But what I'm saying is if you'll just trust and you'll start breathing some life into that and you'll start working on yourself and working on this thing and bringing this thing into life and acknowledging that you are one with the divine, I'm telling you, things will transform in your life like you've never, ever imagined. You're beautiful. On a deep level, you really are perfect, whole, and complete. We've just forgot about it. And guess what? Now it's time to remember. I hope you guys have a fantastic Mother's Day. Hey, Mom, I love you. I couldn't be more grateful for what you did for me. Like I've shared with many of you, my mom is the one that introduced me to Unity over 40 years ago. She is the one that walked me in these doors. I still have books that she wrote on and her little notes going through all the original Unity texts. It's quite a blessing in my life. And so, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and we hope to see you here soon back at Unity Center for Spiritual Growth. Thank you. At this time, we just want to talk about our love offering. And as I begin to really sink into this whole thought of this process, I hope that when people give to our church, what they're thinking about really is why do people give? Why do people do this? And I know we all have a different reason for why it is that we give. But my hope and prayer is that when you think about giving to our church, that the thing that you're thinking about is, what are they doing? What is it that we're out there trying to create? And so I just want to talk about our vision, and then I also want to talk about our mission, just to kind of remind you guys of what we're up to. So our mission is helping people find wholeness and healing on all levels, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, by offering a variety of learning opportunities, spiritual practices, and healing techniques. We also try to remind everybody about their divinity and that they are worthy of love, forgiveness, acceptance, no matter who they are. We also do it by creating deep connections within our community, and by being the change we wish to see in the world, we make a global impact. That when you give to the church, just understanding that we are doing things here, that we're out there trying to make a difference. We're trying to make an impact in your life and then go out and make that difference in our community. So when you donate to the church, when you give to the church, I really hope and pray from the bottom of my heart that what you're doing is you're giving because you're excited about what we're up to. I know that we are, and so I hope you're excited as well. So, having said that, we take our love offering in our hand, and we say our love offering blessing, which is, divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And by the way, just so you know, we just want to say that you can donate by going to our website. There's a couple of different options on the website we have, and we're just grateful, grateful, grateful for what you give to the church financially, and also for the volunteers that are here, and for everybody else. I just want to give a great big warm thank you, thank you, thank you for doing that. And together we will say the prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God is within us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you, and God bless.